In the grad cert, you speak about the image of the Muslim child as being essential to rethinking behaviour and classroom management within Islamic schooling. What does this mean?
I mean, it's a couple of things. I think firstly, research tells us, and definitely experience as well, that one of the really important practices within any school is to challenge, push back, and reject deficit views of students or learners. When we have asset views or strength-based views of our learners, this is far more conducive to the aims that we hold, whether they be behavioural goals, character or disposition goals, creative or academic or any other type of goal. The other thing is that it's a recognition and an acknowledgement that contemporary educational approaches, including those to behaviour management, classroom management, positive learning environments, learning ecologies, or simply engaging teaching and learning pedagogy, all of these are premised upon a theory of the child, the learner. And perhaps we're familiar with famous theorists who've offered a theory of the child, such as Piaget, Erikson, Glasser, Vygotsky. So the question then is, well, why would this be important and why is this important? Well, the theory of the child, the theory that the aforementioned theories, all of these inform as well as reflect a particular image that we have of our learners, which subsequently informs our understandings of child development. And often then this informs policies and models that we employ in our schools. And this subsequently shapes the language that we use, and then finally the practices that we adopt. So whilst we can gain tremendous value from some of the aforementioned theorists that I mentioned, it is important to note that none of them have specifically studied or looked at the Muslim learner. And yet we have such an incredible and an extensive theorisation of the Muslim child and of child development within our own educational heritage. So speaking in a theoretical sense, you might ask, well, what does this mean for me? Now, I know in reality, often we would be working with certain approaches, not fully aware of the theory or that underpins, which can mean that sometimes our approaches aren't aligned to the vision for learning or the measures of success in our school context. So we ask the question, is reward and punishment a viable approach? Does a restorative justice type model develop the types of habits and dispositions that we'd hope for? Does the very common stepped approach, where consequences for misbehaviour of students increase in severity, and then we employ quite sophisticated electronic record keeping and standard stepped approaches to as a consequence, does this really develop the young person we envisage as future graduates of our Islamic schools? And do various coercive tactics like coloured charts and teacher tricks that we tend to use, are all of these valid? Are all of these consistent with our philosophy of education? And will they lead to transformed learners or merely compliant ones? And when is compliance in a classroom enough? And when do we want for something else? So these are the contestations we have, but it begins from that image that we have of the Muslim child, that theory we have of the Muslim child, particularly given that Muslim learners are often, strongly considered to be marginalised learners within the context of Australian schooling generally, and within the context of an Islamic school. Parents choose Islamic schools in the hope that the graduates their children, our graduates, are going to leave our schools imbuing the vision that we had for the school, the qualities that we draw from within faith, as well as within various cultural norms, and to be successful people in a more holistic sense beyond school. So that's the emphasis on the Muslim learner or the Muslim child.